Hola, buenos días, Cal. Calove, estás en Barcelona y estamos aquí para hablar un poco de tu nueva novela, La estrella de la mañana, y un poco de tu proceso creativo y del cómo ha sido el paso de todos esos años escribiendo Mi lucha y hablando de uno mismo a crear un montón de voces en primera persona también para contar esta novela. De hecho, me gustaría que empezáramos hablando por cómo ha sido volver a crear personajes, volver a escribir una novela y cómo aparece la historia de la estrella de la mañana. Si fue al descubrir que había habido avistamientos de estrellas que antes no estaban en el cielo, mucho más grandes de lo habitual, que decidiste, sería interesante contar qué pasaría hoy si de repente apareciese una estrella en el cielo y pudiésemos empezar a creer en los milagros otra vez o en otra cosa distinta a la realidad que tenemos.
So I think what I wanted to do, because I wrote many pages about myself and my own life. I think it was like 3,600 pages. And even though there are different layers, I mean, there is kind of one tone and voice and way of experience life when you're 16 and another when you're 40, right? There are layers, but it still is like the same. It's like the same road through the world. I wanted to do something completely different after that. I was kind of longing for all those bits and parts that's not me in the world. You know, how to get access to a different view on the world. Well, you invent a character. So I invented, I think in the first book it's like 9 characters. Some of them are similar to me, and that's at least one of them kind of have the same background, more or less the same musical taste, but then it departs. And the others are, some of them are very different. I started with the most difficult one. She's a woman. She's a mother to a 19-year-old girl, and she's also a daughter to a mother that need a lot of care. So she's staying. So it's a house with 3 women, and she is a very good person. I wanted to write about a good person. This is as far away from me you can come. She's a woman. She's a good person, and she lives in a house with other women. But it was so incredibly difficult to write because I'm used to not create characters. I haven't done that for years. So everything that I think is in the novel almost, you know. But then now I didn't know how, what do a woman think? How do a woman feel? How is it to be a woman? And how can I say anything about it? I don't know anything. So in the beginning I was very restricted. I kind of, I hardly wrote anything just because I couldn't know, could a woman say this? Could a woman think this? And then everything is wrong, you have to just go for it and you have to just invest yourself in it. And then I said, I had to just say fuck to all of that and just write and hope to get some life into her. And she was the first person. And then it was the second, third, and then it became more and more easy because I took more and more chances. And now, so that was basically the process. What I wanted was like a choir of voices, different voices, all of them seeing the same thing, and all of them reacting differently. So the same thing is there is a new star in the sky, they don't know what it is.
Cuando hablabas de crear una mujer y la voz femenina, lo que comparten todas las voces de ese coro es algo que comparten con tu propia voz en Mi lucha, que es el detalle a lo cotidiano. Hay muchísimo detalle de todo aquello que hacemos cada día y que creo que tiene mucho que ver con la idea de la novela en sí, ¿no? En el momento que aparece esta cosa en el cielo como algo extraordinario, la realidad de cada uno es tan opaca en ese sentido, está tan cerrada con toda esa cotidianidad que efectivamente cada uno reacciona de una manera distinta y unos reaccionan, digamos, de una forma más milagrosa que otros. Unos creen más que otros o unos empiezan a preguntarse cosas que los demás no se preguntan. Me interesa mucho la forma de ir al detalle que sí que entronca con tu obra y con tu yo personal de primera persona. ¿Cómo construyes todo eso? Incluso el detalle de las personas con las que se encuentran. No sé si tomas nota de gente con la que te cruzas o de actos muy, muy cotidianos.
Yeah, there's a lot of details. And it is, in everything I write, it is a lot of details. And it's not like I think, I'm going to be a writer who writes novels with a lot of details. It's just become my way to write. And I think the reason why is that what I want from literature is presence. It's the feeling of being there. And when I was little, that was what I wanted from literature. It was not to be taken somewhere, put somewhere else, and you are in it, So I never liked those kind of, when you play with the narrator enter the stage and say, yeah, well, this is just a play and he's not real, and then go on. They're like the postmodern experiment thing. I always want presence. And my method of evoking presence has been details. When I write, I start with a room, always a space, because that's where you are. And I describe the space, and I don't know what's going to happen, don't know who these persons are. I just start with that. If there's a woman, she can just turn around. Oh, there's someone there. Who's that? But it's the being there. That's the thing. And then I kind of discovered all kind of other stuff that are related to this. For instance, the thought that no matter what happens, or fantastic things, or terrible things, you will always be attached or in connection with daily life. No matter how fantastic thoughts you have about philosophy or the meaning of life, whatever, you still have to go to the bathroom, and you still have to drink your coffee or whatever you're doing, or change nappies, and that's where we live our lives. Everything that happens there. So that's the place for a novel, I think, for my novels at least. And in this case, it's even more obvious because there is this thing on what do you do when something fantastic happens? Do you kind of let everything go and just, no, you don't. You have your children, or you are a child, and you have to deal with all of that. And I think that's kind of an experience if something radical happens, if there's a war or if anything, that the daily life continues no matter what. And I feel like comfort in that thought, because all ideologies and all kind of utopian thinking and everything is just doesn't make me feel good just because it is not connected. I mean, Nazism or whatever, or any religion that has these promises, they don't relate to the real life, the truth, where we are. And I feel kind of novel is the perfect place to investigate and look at that, because this is a novel with ideas, and there will be several other novels, so it is a novel of ideas, but they are all it's like, yeah, I'm thinking about something and I want to explore something, but it's all every time a character is taking on the thoughts, that is more important, that takes over. But if you look at academic writing about things, it's about that, and it's kind of outside of everything, and it's brilliant, but it's when you read it, you are still connected to the world. So it's something in that area, I think, that makes me always do that. And it's also a defect. There's something wrong with the way I write. I can't say. I remember I went to a creative writing course when I was 19, and I remember the teacher said, Karl Ove, you don't have to describe how he takes down the door handle, open the door, go out. You can just say, start the next sentence, outside, I da-da-da. But I can't. I have to follow them kind of, it's almost like some sort of obsessive thing I have, that I can't just say 10 minutes later or a week later. I have to follow them. And that's why the novel is, the time scale of this novel is like, 2 days, yeah. And it's, I don't know how many pages in Spanish, but it was 700 pages in Norwegian.
Sí, porque eso sería un poco como editar la realidad, ¿no? Lo que haces es no editarla, simplemente seguir a los personajes en todo lo que hacen.
Yeah, and it's also the fact that I actually don't know what's going to happen. So that makes it very hard to write, because when I sit down in the morning, I know I have to write 3 pages, and I don't know what's going to happen. And yeah, and it is realistic in a way, this novel, so it is all within a realistic frame, you know. So that makes it very hard for me to write, and I can't cheat. It feels like cheating if I say, you know, jump a week or 2. So it's all down there within what's going on. But the thing is, then things also happens that I could never plan, you know. All of a sudden there is a thought, all of a sudden there is something happening within that space, opening the door, going out, there is something happening, and that could change the whole novel, you know. So it is also important part of it to be very, very slow in the movements. But of course it's incredibly boring too. I mean, sorry about that.
Bueno, es ir pensando la novela mientras escribe, con lo cual es como, en este caso, haber interpretado a 9 personajes que son muy distintos y tienen voces muy distintas. Lo que hay en el fondo, sin embargo, creo que es algo que viene incluso de tu producción anterior a Mi lucha, que es ese choque entre el mundo racional y el mundo irracional. Bueno, hay una búsqueda en la novela o un intento de poder creer en algo más allá de lo que vemos, ¿no? O de que la realidad no sea exactamente la que se entiende como real, sino lo que cada uno percibe. Yo creo que el cuarteto de las estaciones ya fue una manera de explicar la realidad desde un yo concreto, que era el tuyo, pero aquí digamos que la realidad se rompe con la aparición de esa estrella, y entonces aparece el elemento irracional frente a lo racional, y se hace también bueno, la novela clama un poco hacia creer en algo más de lo que vemos, o no sé cuánto hay de ese aspirante a creyente en Karlove, porque creo que ha estado siempre ahí.
Yeah, well, it's a lot. That's why I'm writing. I mean, that's the whole thing. But I think it's if you have the kind of 2 concepts. One is believing, and the other one is kind of reality as it is. It's not like that. That's the feeling I have. It's like we are believing in the reality. That's our belief. But we do believe it so strongly that it kind of is. You know what I mean? I've been always, almost since I was a little kid, been struck by the different versions of the world throughout times. So, you know, if you look at what people saw in medieval times, for instance, you know, you could see miracles, and you can see, you know, wooden statues bleeding, or you could see kind of visions of angels. So there's a lot of things that people saw, and the devil. What was that? You know, well, we know that doesn't exist. It's just in their mind, but then everything is in our mind. The world is something we learn. You know, it's the fact that when you see something, the most information comes from back and out instead of from out of in. So you're kind of confirming, when we see something, more confirming a model of the world that we have and adjusting to it. So what I'm getting at is that we have versions of the world, and they change throughout times according to what we believe in. And in this book, I wanted to have something that we didn't know what was, something we don't know what it is. That is unheard of, because we know everything what it is, you know? Everything has an explanation. And if it comes something in a newspaper, you know, like they found some object in Japan on a beach or something, or there was a sea animal that looks like a monster, what is this? And then next day, oh, this is, someone knows, and it is this, you know? So we have defined the whole world, you know, perfectly. It is everything we know, but everything is, you know? But then there comes something, we don't know what it is. is that even possible to think? Yeah, of course, because really we don't know what things are really, you know. We don't know what consciousness is. We don't know really what life is, how life is possible. We don't know how everything can come from nothing. We don't know, you know. And if you go down to the tiniest, you know, particles and nuclear physics, then I read, it is Carlo Rovelli. He's a brilliant popularizer, because I don't know anything about physics, but you can read books like him. It's like things come into being only in relation to something else. So it's like nothing is in itself. It comes only when it's related to something else. It's like, well, there is. How can you grasp that? And I mean, that's the thing. And I wanted to have a novel where something is. They don't know what it is. Everybody has to react to it. Someone would define it. Someone would think about something, God or divine or evil or whatever, and some wouldn't care. But that's kind of the thing that changes everything a little bit, because there is something in the world we don't know what is. Have no idea. And then that creates some sort of, we're not certain about things, and things starts to kind of the strict borders between things, for instance life and death, starts to kind of move a little bit, and it becomes a little bit creepy. Animals start to behave a little bit differently, and you know that can happen, and it is very frightening. That is what is frightening, when things changed, behavior around you change, you know. So that's that's very much what I'm looking at in these books. It is, what is this, you know? That's the question.
Y aparecen un montón, como has dicho, de animales extraños, incluso de humanoides, y hay personajes que los ven, otros que no los ven. Toda esa parte fantástica de la historia es algo que imagino has encontrado en otros libros, porque me temo que te documentas bastante cuando escribes, y supongo que en este caso te has documentado tanto sobre milagros, sobre apariciones, los momentos en que han aparecido este tipo de estrellas. ¿Es así?
What kind of things do you mean then? The animals or?
Tanto la aparición de los cangrejos como este hombre con cabezas de toros, y bueno, todo lo que los pájaros, o sea, las cosas que te parece algo bíblico en todo caso, ¿no? Parecen como cosas que vienen de algún tipo de tradición concreta.
Yeah, no, they are kind of invented, but for the purpose. But then, you know, from the back of my head, I have a million of images that comes from, you know, the Bible and the culture around the Bible. So it's a little bit of the flying creature with human face. It's a little bit of Goya's. Do you say Goya? Mm-hmm. You know, he has this very dark flying humans that, for instance, it comes from those kind of. It's not defined at all. It's just an atmosphere or something that I have, and I want to kind of recreate. So there's no research or anything. It's whatever comes during the writing.
Centrándonos en los personajes un poco, hay dos parejas bastante centrales, que es la de Arne y Tove, y la de Jostein y Turid hacia el final. En ambas se trata el tema de la salud mental de formas distintas. En el caso de Tove tiene un brote psicótico, y aparece uno de los temas, yo creo, clásicos de tu obra, que es también la idea de cuidar de los demás, ¿no? La idea del cuidado. Y en el caso de la otra pareja, de Turid y de Jostein, es lo mismo, porque tiene un hijo adolescente que no está bien, y ninguno de los dos sabe cómo acercarse a él, y hay como un bloqueo en las relaciones personales, que creo que es algo que aparece en Mi lucha, y creo que es un tema que te interesa, y me gustaría que nos hablaras un poco de eso.
I think what I'm interested in is relations, basically. And very essential in that is the relation between parents and children, because that's that's where that is something that is part of your life throughout your life, and so the first couple you mentioned is Arne and Tove. So they're in a holiday house by the coast. They have 3 children. Tove is an artist. She is this summer kind of getting closer to a breakdown and to a psychosis. And Arne he's a literature professor. He's very tired of this situation with a mentally ill wife, and he's drinking way too much. And the children is just in the background. So the night the novel starts, basically, he's drinking, she's getting out there, and he's just leaving them drinking. So it's the thought, what will happen with his children? What does this kind of behavior do to them? And how did the parents get there? Maybe they have it's something that goes on and on, you can imagine, there is neglect and there is bad parenting, but it's also, of course, good stuff. But it's just something that's going on in the back of the novel. I think just because it feels like there is it is very easy to kind of, in our time, to get into some sort of narcissistic, mode. That career and your job and your work is kind of, it's so important that the children are, a bit in the dark. On the other hand, when I grew up in the 70s, it was like completely freedom because nobody cared. You could just do what you wanted. It was great. It was really great. So you can wonder if kind of this nurturing, hands-on way of dealing with children are better, or that just you do what you want and you will be fine, It's kind of 2 very different attitudes, and all of this are just thrown into the novel. It's not like I think, I want to, investigate relations between. This is just something that the characters have and are doing, and my policy, if I write something and I'm interested in something, then there have some relevance to someone, I hope, because we share the same, very much the world. So I don't know. It isn't planned, at least. It's just something that comes through writing the novel.
Okay. Pero sí que hay un tema en todos los casos también con el personaje que cuida a la vez de su madre y de su hija adolescente, la mujer que has mencionado como la primera que apareció. Hay un tema sobre el cuidado y la irresponsabilidad o la responsabilidad y el querer escapar de esa responsabilidad y poder ser tú solo, ¿no? Eso es algo que vuelve una y otra vez y que en este caso se ve en casi todos los personajes, que hay incluso el personaje que quiere ser bueno, como has dicho antes, también siente encima ese peso de los cuidados. Eso es algo muy interesante a tratar, es un tema literario interesantísimo a tratar en el mundo de hoy, que se está debatiendo la idea de los cuidados, la importancia de cuidar del otro.
Yes, true. And I'm interested in it. Maybe because I'm caring for 7 children myself, so it's a very relevant topic for me. But no, I think one of the characters that I do really like writing about in the book is called Egil. And he's from a very young age kind of completely obsessed by freedom. He wants to be free. Freedom is the most important thing for him. He can't have any relations really, because as soon as there start to be some kind of obligations, he's not there. He's leaving. So we find him in his 40s. He lives in a cottage on the coast. He's come from a quite wealthy family, so he's good. I mean, but he's happy, he's free, And then he has a son. And the son, the mother says, well, you have to take him today. He's not in touch with his son. And he said, no, I can't, you can't, don't come with him. And she says, yes, I can. He's on the bus now. I'm off to somewhere. You have to go and meet him. And you have to go and meet the son. And the son, of course, absolutely hates his father. So, and the father is kind. I mean, it's just he wants his freedom. He doesn't want any responsibility. And that's kind of the core. That's the day they have, an evening they have together is, you know, I was also thinking a lot of biblical stuff. I mean, it's the Abraham, Isaac thing where Abraham is, you know, got order from God to sacrifice his son, and he's willing to do it. You know, for what? Yeah, for God, for whatever that is. And Egil, that character is, but he doesn't connect those dots. But he became Christian in that period. He's looking into the abyss. He's leaving society. God is something, you know, out there, not relating to humans at all. Just the divine, great unknown. It's like Kierkegaard, you know, the jump into the, yeah. And he doesn't connect those two things. He doesn't see it. And then you have another Christian person in this novel. She's a priest. She's called Katrine. And for her, religion is the opposite. That's the connection between people. That the things that kind of comes from many, you know, she refers it to like a choir. It's you part of it, but it's greater. The whole is greater, and community, and it's about mercy, and it's about, that's part of Christianity, which is, you know, it's in the Bible, it's relevant, and the other one is relevant too. Both are, but they're kind of in completely different worlds. And she discovered in the Bible another story that has to do with a father sacrificing a child, except he actually sacrifices her, and it's a girl. I never heard about that story, but it's in the Bible, and it's like it just happens. Then you have the grand Isaac and Abraham, and then you have this little story where he actually kills his daughter. I stumbled upon that story because I read some feminist theology because I had a woman priest. But it's like, and when you write a novel, everything makes sense. I got this character, and I got this kind of belief, and I got this relation to the son, and then I have this. And it's connected, but it's, you know, it's also very different. So and then you can play with that, and without knowing anything about it before you start to write. But he's very much he wants his freedom, and he wants his meaningful life and the meaning of life. But without, you know, others, it's absolutely empty, and you can imagine yourself that it isn't, but it is. That's what's going on with him. But I really liked writing about him because he's genuinely a good person, I think. But he's just not willing to
accept it.
Yeah, to as you say, care. People don't want to care for anyone. He wants to care for his, you know, his intellect or his thoughts or his.
De hecho, Egil es el autor del ensayo que hay dentro del libro.
Yeah, and he's also a writer. Yeah, that's right.
Y que, bueno, claro, si la figura de la que se trataba el ensayo de mi lucha era Hitler, aquí, bueno, como has dicho, es la muerte en sí, pero también es el cristianismo porque él va en ese camino. Y como has dicho bien, él está intentando huir del contexto porque hay un momento determinado en que se habla de la idea de ser, simplemente solo ser, cómo sería simplemente ser sin ningún tipo de contexto, ¿no? Poder mirar al cielo, poder mirar un pájaro cantar sin saber nada más. Y eso lo enlaza con la idea de Cristo como persona o personaje, de lo que se sabe de él. Me interesa mucho que nos hables un poco de cómo entra el propio ensayo o toda esta idea del cristianismo en la novela, que entra a través de la propia estrella, ¿no? Y parece una búsqueda que está en el corazón de la historia.
Yeah. The thing is written through Egil, which means that it's not, of course, the one who wrote it, but it's not me who's thinking. It's kind of channeling things through him, and then I end up at places that's not mine, but it's places the novel. But it is an essay, and it is quite a while since I wrote the book. So if you ask me more specific, I might be able to reply to it. But it's about death. It starts with the idea: what if death didn't exist? Why is death necessary? Why is it part of nature? Because it would be perfectly okay to think, is a world but there's no death? What makes death so important that it is everywhere? Why can't life be created and just last, you know? And that's the kind of starting point of the essay, and then it goes, I think, to what death have been in kind of different cultures, and it dwells, I think, in Greece a bit, because in my mind, Greece is kind of the place for the rational thought and the place for creation of everything that we do have in this society. You know, it's democracy, it's policy, it's philosophy, it's natural science. It's like everything was organized there. And then I started to read a bit about that time and what was going on in terms of religion and what I believed in, and it was like I was astonished, because it is really, really, really something very irrational going on there in the relation to the dead and to death and communication with the dead and all of that, and I wrote about that, and you see some sort of pattern throughout history is that there is a connection between the living and the dead. That's throughout history. It's gone now, at least in my part of the world. It's doesn't exist anymore. But you know, you can't stop helping. What if? You know, what is this? What is, you know, the border between dead and living, and what is all of this? And the thing about all of this, going through a cultural history of death and what people have been thinking, and it's all abstract, and it's all like a intellectual game or whatever. But if you have experienced death, you know, it's all about that. It's erased everything. It's incredibly, it's terrible. It's just a black hole. It's just nothing. It's everything but an abstract game, you know. So then I let, and I realized that when I was writing, so I let Egil experience something at the end of that, when he actually meets it in a very brutal way, meet death in a very brutal way. He meets someone at the train that he's funny, he wants to drink, but then I realized that he's in enormous grief. He's lost his daughter and he's on the way to the funeral, and he is desperate for, come drink with me, we go there together. There's a scandal. It's if you think the greatest grief possible, you don't care about anything anymore, you know, you're just beyond that. And he meets someone who is there, and they see something together at the end of the essays that has to do with what we've been talking about. But the thing is that I actually, in the real world, when I was in my 20s, I took the train from Oslo to Bergen at night. And, you know, I come in there, and we had 2 beds, and I went to my bed, and then there was another one, but he was drinking. He was my age, a bit older maybe, and he wanted to talk. I didn't want to talk, but he kind of insisted, and then in the end we sat all night. He talked about everything about his life, because he knew he would never see me again, so he could, like, everything. And I did the same. But then he started to talk about something. He worked as an anesthetic doctor at a kind of emergency thing, so there were helicopters, and this was in Norway. People live really remote in fjords and mountains, and so he was flying around with helicopter you know, you land in the middle of the night somewhere with a helicopter, and it's just a house there, and you run there and deal with someone dying, you know. And he said, yeah, and then there was someone standing there looking at us, and he was asking, you know, who's that? And nobody could see him. So he started to see people when he was in a situation where with death, that was kind of standing in the background. And maybe he was joking, but it made such a huge impression on me because he was serious. This was what's happened, and I always thought that has to be a novel one day, you know, because it's and also like, you know, the fact that yeah, we know it's not true. We know it doesn't happen. We know death is death, you know. But then it's like it's keep coming, and also it's a metaphor for the past, of course. It's for everything that we still have that comes, you know, it's haunting us, coming after us. What have happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago? It's still with us, which is another way of thinking of it's the dead coming, showing themselves to us. You know what I mean. It's yeah, it's just a very exciting place to think, I think.
No sé si, ahora que dices todo esto, no sé si cuando, después de acabar mi lucha y escribir el cuarteto, enfrentarte de nuevo a una novela y teniendo en cuenta cómo escribes, que simplemente la historia va apareciendo, ¿no tienes la sensación un poco de seguir siendo una especie de medium de ti mismo, de tus propios intereses, de tus propios, bueno, de cosas que te preguntas y que en este caso a través de los personajes te has repartido en todos ellos y en cada uno has tocado una tecla de algo que querías descubrir?
There was a lesson from, there was another, I just read an interview with, she's a poet, but she's been teaching creative writing many years. She's really good. And one of the things she said was, you know, go home and write about the milk, you know, that's the glass of milk. Boy, she said, kind of to a writer. And I think when I couldn't write when I was in my 20s, it was because I wanted to write about something very important. I wanted it to be great and important and, you know, should be. But then very much through my first novel, but also very much through my struggle, I learned that you can just write about anything you want, really. And something will come through that you have, and if you have it, then it comes from, you know, from the culture around you. So it's not like being a medium, it's just being alive, you know. So and the connections you do when you're writing, it's not I'm not thinking about them, it just happens, and it's connecting things that exist around you, you know. So I very much believe in that. Whatever. So I start to write about the character. He has or she has something, surrounded by something, it will connect to something that I would be interested in. And yeah, and the whole point for me doing this personally is to get away from myself, my own way of thinking, and into something a bit different, which is fun, but it's of course me, but different parts of me. I got a feeling as a writer and also as a reader that the conscious self is kind of a very thin and layer, and then there is a lot of other stuff going on that's not really incorporated in the feeling of self, but it's part of you, you know. So that's why it's possible to read a novel. You read someone else saying I, so you're saying I, and you are seeing these images coming from someone else, and if it's a very good novel, it's like you are the novel, and that's that's like, for me, it's like an endless fascination with literature. It's so amazing, you know, and also that it crosses times. I mean, you can read your classic Don Quixote. Is that how you say it? No, it's not. But you know, and it's a very old book, and there's no one in that book that are alive, or everything is, you know, but you can still read it with great pleasure and makes it alive, and you know, all of that. It's part of the same. So when you write something and you think, wow, I really am a good writer, I've made this, and this is what I've done, and it's my, you know, it's you know, It isn't. It isn't. It is you are what you have been reading and what you have, and then it's just a matter of unlock it somehow. But you can't write a novel without having read other novels. That's just, I think, absolutely impossible. And it's the same with language. It's not my language. It's not your language. It's very old. It's just been passed on to us. So yeah, that's I don't really know what you asked anymore.
Entiendo que bueno, primero quería preguntarte qué estás leyendo ahora en ese sentido, cómo ha ido cambiando tu gusto lector con el tiempo, qué clase de lector más o menos cazador eres, ¿no? ¿Qué tipo de libros vas buscando en cada momento? Y luego, ¿cuál fue el primer libro que te dijo, yo quiero hacer exactamente esto, crear algo que no existe, pero estar ahí dentro durante el tiempo que tarde en escribirlo?
So I'm writing now, it's a biography about Pessoa, the Portuguese writer, which I always kind of liked. I love the Book of Disquiet, but I have never knew anything about him, except that he has this heteronym, so he writes on many different characters. And then a few years ago, this massive biography came out. So I bought it, and now I started to read it, and I'm really intrigued. He's such I never read about any writer like him. It's like what is he doing? What is this about? You know, it's incredibly fascinating. So I do read a lot at the moment, non-fiction. That's basically what I do read. Very rarely fiction. Also because I need it for what I'm writing. So I do read. I don't read much because I don't have time. But everything I read, I hope, will be something that will lead to something in my writing. I read in the evening, so it's the daytime writing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot of popular science, yeah, in all ways. And I do really like biographies and philosophy and lots of that stuff. But there is one book that really wanted me to be a writer, and I got it, I remember, from my mother when I was 10 years old. It's the Earthsea books by Ursula K. Le Guin. Mm-hmm. I was completely blown back by them. I really was, and I really think those books somehow changed something in me. It's weird, but I think they did. I was so attached to them. I read them so many times, you know. And I think they have been very important for my writing. Not only that I wanted to become a writer, but because of what, there is a scene in there where the border between death and life is blurred, and he crossed that border and comes back, and it's like those kind of way of thinking that is, it is basically in my book as well now. And this is a book for children, so it's not, but it's very good. She was a very good writer, I think, Ursula K. Le Guin.
En esos libros precisamente está que la idea de la palabra crea el mundo. Yo creo que también es algo que define muy bien tu literatura.
Yeah, I think so. And I think another book that's been very important to me is a short story. It's my favorite short stories of all time. It's Borges. Is that how you say it? Yeah. His Clone Akbar short story. It's about finding encyclopedia describing a world that doesn't exist, and in the end, that world has kind of entered our world and changed it. It's such a mind-blowing and incredibly good short story, but it's Borges is like one of his tiny ideas. Could be 10 novels for me, but he compresses it, and it's really such genius work. But that was also very important to me, that short story, and it is exactly that. The world consists of words. It's invented, Doesn't look like it, but it is actually, I think.
Y la última pregunta sería, ahora que has vuelto a la novela, no sé si alguna vez volveremos a tener un yo de Kálove como el de Mi lucha, o si van a seguir siendo novelas lo que escribas, o quizá ensayos. No sé si puedes contar si ya estás escribiendo algo, hacia dónde va, o si es algo que también aparece, igual que aparece en la que apareció este personaje y que de ahí nace toda la historia. No sé si nos puedes contar algo de si hay planes o no hay planes tampoco.
Yeah. So The Morning Star, I wrote a novel after that, very long novel, taking place in 1986, partly in Norway, partly in Russia, and it ends now with the Morning Star rising, so it's related to the Morning Star. And in that book, it seems like people stop dying, seems like death is disappearing. And then the year after that, I wrote another book with all the characters in the Morning Star, but the one who's not speaking, for instance, Tove, now you got her story, which is very different from her husband Arnes in this book. And then still the Morning Star is there, but now it seems like death is, there's no one dying those days. And now I'm writing a fourth book about this, but it's back in 1986 again, and this time it's in London, and this time it has some, like, the devil is in it somehow. So it's a series.
Ah.
So the Morning Star is, I didn't plan that, but it's just become it's like becoming a universe in itself, which is great fun to do, to work with.
Pues nada, esperaremos a leerlos todos. Muchas gracias, Kálove, por este rato que hemos pasado charlando.
Oh, thank you very much. It's very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.